I knew it was over the moment Kyle called me ma'am like it was a slur. He didn't say it with respect, he said it the way you'd say cockroach if it had a retirement plan. 25 years of blood, sweat, and solder, and now I'm boxed up like expired toner. My badge deactivated itself before I even made it to the elevator. That's how Apex manufacturing ends for me. Not with a thank you, not with a cake, but with a shrill beep and the sterile scent of Lysol on faux wood laminate. I looked around my desk one last time. It used to be a mess, but the kind of mess that meant something. Blueprints tucked under empty tea mugs, post-its full of cryptic equations only I understood, and a half-eaten bag of Werther's originals I never had the heart to throw out. Now it was barren. Except for the framed blueprint. When I drew by hand back when the company was still in Jerry Kaplan's garage, long before the bean-counting MBA with the high-water pants and a worship complex for Elon Musk took over. I held the frame in my hands a moment longer than I needed to. Then I slipped it into my tote bag like it was a holy relic. Let me guess, you're already hooked, and if you are, humor me for 2 seconds. Only 3% of folks watching are actually subscribed. That means 97% of y'all are just ghosting me like Kyle ghosted employee loyalty. I'm trying to hit 10,000 subs, my first real milestone, and it would mean the world if you clicked that little button. It's free, and unlike Kyle's leadership skills, it actually helps somebody. Back to the chaos. Kyle strutted past my cubicle as I was zipping up my coat, holding a half-empty protein shake, and talking loudly into his Bluetooth earpiece about vertical integration and breaking legacy paradigms. I don't know what was more offensive, the buzzwords or the smell of synthetic vanilla and unchecked arrogance. He didn't even glance in my direction. Just walked by like I was part of the decor, maybe a fax machine that hadn't been removed yet. The only nod I got was from Margaret at reception, who gave me the kind of tight-lipped smile women reserve for funerals and court dates. I made my way through the building slowly, like I was saying goodbye to a dying relative. The loading docks. The old break room with the vending machine that always ate your change but never your hope. The worn-out linoleum near the calibration bays where we used to prank each other with fake hazard signs. Every corner held a memory, and every memory stung like lemon juice in a paper cut. You know what really got me, though? The interns didn't even know who I was. One of them called me Miss Susan from HR. I designed half the systems that run this place. I wrote the logic trees that keep the robotic arms from twisting into spaghetti. And yet, in Kyle's brave new world, I was just another name on a severance form printed by someone born after dial-up. When I stepped outside, it was raining, not the dramatic, cinematic kind, but that Ohio kind of drizzle that feels like the sky is just spitting on you for fun. I sat in my car for a long time, hands gripping the wheel, the blueprint resting on the passenger seat like it was watching me. I wasn't sad, not really. I was something colder, heavier, like steel cooling after being forged. Because here's the thing, Kyle didn't just fire me. He fired the only person who knew where the real bones were buried. The only one who understood the code base written in a language I invented. The new automation system he'd just sunk millions into? That sleek, proprietary software suite he was crowing about at last week's town hall? It had a name, Viridian Dynamics, and it was mine. It was the Monday after my exile had been finalized that Kyle held his grand town hall, flanked by rented spotlights and the overconfident smug of a man who thinks charisma is a PowerPoint transition. He wore a headset mic like he was about to drop a TED talk no one asked for, pacing the floor in those white-soled tech bro sneakers that scream, I read half of 0 to 1 and think I'm Jesus with a Series B. The projector clicked on behind him, casting bold Helvetica across the cheap folding screen. Viridian Dynamics, the future of Apex manufacturing. I almost choked on my thermos coffee. Not because of the name, I'd chosen that back when I was still naive enough to believe hard work got rewarded, but because of the pomp. The man had branded it. A system he didn't even understand, dressed up in buzzwords and venture capital perfume. We're entering a new era, Kyle announced, arms spread like he was Moses parting the Red Sea of mediocrity. No more legacy code, no more patchwork solutions. This company is going to be fully optimized, data-driven, AI-enhanced, and automated from end to end. There it was, the sales pitch of a man who hadn't built a damn thing in his life. He didn't even know how the core systems worked, but he sure knew how to promise a future built on fairy dust and my life's work. He clicked to the next slide. A flowchart stripped of nuance, bloated with efficiency nodes and arrows pointing in every direction like a toddler got a hold of a diagramming tool. At the top was the Viridian logo, my logo, doctored with a gradient and corporate watermark. Then came the jab. Now, I know some departments have been hesitant to evolve, Kyle said, voice all faux diplomacy and smirking teeth. They're used to, let's say, traditional methods. He didn't look at me. He didn't have to. The entire room turned their heads like sunflowers chasing shame. Right on cue, my former department slide popped up. A collage of hand-drawn schematics, old test equipment, even a photo of the wall calendar I refused to digitize. This, he chuckled, is what we're replacing. A few chuckles followed, nervous ones. The kind people make when the person being roasted still has friends in the room. I said nothing. But I smiled. It wasn't big, just the faintest curve of the lips. The kind of smile you'd miss if you blinked, but Linda didn't blink. She sat 2 rows behind me, pen halfway to her notebook, and caught the whole thing. Her eyes widened. She knew that smile. She'd seen it once before, the day I figured out how to reduce the calibration time by 60% and didn't tell anyone for 3 weeks just to make the department head sweat. That smile wasn't amusement. That was strategy. Kyle rambled on. Words like agility, digital pivot, and disruptive synergy poured from his mouth like he was trying to drown us in syllables. He played a video mock-up next, with stock footage of robotic arms and anonymous workers smiling in sterile hallways. The music was royalty-free optimism, and the tagline made me want to vomit. Viridian Dynamics, because the future waits for no one, except it had waited, for me, for years. I'd built that future on my weekends in my garage, when Apex was too broke to fund anything that didn't involve duct tape and vendor rebates. I'd buried the real documentation so deep, no one without the keys could touch it, not without my blessing or my wrath. I glanced down at my notebook, still in my lap though I'd been dismissed. One line was scribbled at the top: let them build the gallows with your blueprints. Kyle ended the meeting to scattered applause, the kind that's more about getting out of your seat than admiration. People filed out, whispering about the big shift, the future, the inevitable layoffs. I walked slowly, letting the noise trail off behind me. Linda caught up as I reached the exit. You good? She asked, careful like a nurse checking a patient's pulse after a stroke. I'm excellent, I said, still smiling. They're finally implementing Viridian. Linda blinked. Wait, you're Viridian? I nodded. Oh my God, she muttered. Eyes wide, does he even know? No, I said, pushing open the door. But he's about to find out. It happened on a Friday, of course. The kind of gray, sluggish Ohio Friday where even the birds sound tired. I should have known something was up when Kyle's assistant, fresh out of college and nervous enough to sweat through polyester, appeared at my desk right before lunch. Mr. Kyle wants to see you, in Mr. Ronson's old office. That was a tell. Ronson's old office. Not the conference room. Not the HR fishbowl with the tissues on the table and the framed teamwork posters. This wasn't going to be a performance review. It was going to be an execution. Personal. Intentional. Framed like a gift. I finished my yogurt, tossed it in the trash, and walked down the hall like I had concrete in my bones. The door was already open. Kyle was perched behind Ronson's old desk, now stripped of character and smothered in sleek minimalism. Faux marble top, brushed nickel lamp, a succulent that was probably fake. He hadn't even bothered to look up yet, too busy tapping something into his MacBook like it mattered. Susan, he said, voice syrupy with the kind of fake sympathy you learn in PR training. Thanks for coming by. He gestured to the chair across from him like he owned the room. Which, legally speaking, I guess he did now. But spiritually, that room belonged to the blue-collar ghosts who built this company with scuffed boots and cheap coffee. Not a kid with a crypto wallet and a Wi-Fi-enabled espresso machine. He folded his hands. I'll be blunt. We're making some hard shifts, realigning the company's vision, refreshing the culture, bringing in talent that aligns with the future we're building. Sounds expensive, I said flatly. He smirked like I'd just complimented his sneakers. Point is, you've been a huge part of Apex's past. But you're not a fit for where we're going. Your methods, your style, it's all a bit, let's say, legacy, and we can't afford legacy right now. He delivered that line like he thought it was poetic, like it was going to end up on a slide at some startup conference. We can't afford legacy. Cue thunderous applause from other men who still live with their mothers. I stared at him. I didn't blink, I didn't frown, didn't even breathe heavy. Just sat in silence, listening to the words clang around in my head like a wrench in a dryer. Then I looked behind him, to the wall where Ronson used to hang the staff photos, every anniversary, every safety milestone, every retirement. That wall was bare now. Do I get a box, or should I just use the same tote I brought in 1998? I asked. He blinked. I think facilities can get you one if you need. No need, I said. Standing up, I travel light. I turned and left without shaking his hand. That seemed to unsettle him more than yelling would have. Back at my desk, it took all of 5 minutes to pack. I didn't have much left, just a few notebooks, a thermos with engineers do IT with precision in fading block letters, and the framed blueprint. Viridian V1.1, dated 6 years ago. I stared at it for a long beat. The lines were still crisp, the margins still stained with pencil smudges and T-rings. I ran my thumb across the glass and smiled, but not for nostalgia. It was the smile of a chess player who knows you just moved your queen into a trap. Linda appeared at the edge of my cubicle, eyes wide, mouth already forming the kind of apology people give when they're still trying to figure out if they should hug you or offer tissues. I heard, she whispered. I nodded once. Tell Kyle to read the fine print next time. She blinked. What fine print? I slipped the blueprint into my tote bag. The kind that starts with US. Patent no. 10,812,944 B2. She stared after me like I'd just spoken Latin. I walked out of Apex Manufacturing without looking back. Kyle probably watched from the window like a movie villain watching the hero fade into the mist, thinking he'd won. That smug little click of finality. The great purge complete. Out with the old, in with the ignorant. What he didn't know, what he couldn't know, was that the system he just bet the entire company on, it didn't belong to him. It belonged to me. My garage didn't smell like oil and sawdust like most people's. It smelled like strategy, cold steel, solder resin, and the faint trace of lavender from a sachet my mother tucked into my old toolbox 20 years ago and that I'd never had the heart to throw away. The place was spotless. Pegboard walls lined with labeled tools, binders arranged chronologically by invention, every cable zip-tied like a Boy Scout's nightmare. Most people go to therapy. I alphabetized my drill bits. Saturday morning, while Kyle was probably doing lines of protein powder off a crypto magazine, I sat at my steel desk in the back corner of the workshop and opened the drawer marked Veridian. It slid out smooth. No squeak, no hesitation, just like the revenge I was building. Inside were 7 neatly bound folders, blueprints, test data, and all the grimy little details of Veridian Dynamics. And no, it wasn't a company. It was never meant to be. Veridian was the name I'd given the system years ago, when I realized Apex's production tech was more duct tape than digital. A Frankenstein's monster of legacy code, outdated robotics, and human workarounds so fragile they made IKEA instructions look like military doctrine. Veridian was my answer. A modular, self-optimizing automation suite that could retrofit aging infrastructure without tearing the whole damn factory down. Adaptive, lean, elegant as hell. I built it in this garage with borrowed sensors, a used 3D printer, and one very patient cat. I didn't tell Apex about it at first. Too risky, too radical. But when Ronson was still in charge, back when the company had a soul and didn't host mandatory mindfulness stand-ups, I floated the idea to him. Gave him a peek at the schematics, even offered him a sweetheart licensing deal. Full access, $1 buy-in, and my personal support to integrate it safely. He'd smiled, kind but tired. I'm 3 years from a beach chair, Susan. I can't start revolutionizing the wheelhouse now. Fair enough, so I filed the patents under my name. All of them. Every component, every process tree, every line of code. It was all mine, US. Patent 10,812,944B2, along with 6 others. Public record. Filed through a boutique firm that specialized in protecting women engineers from corporate poachers. I'd paid extra to make sure each patent was airtight, ironclad, because I knew how this industry worked. Sooner or later, someone like Kyle would sniff around, and now the dumb bastard had stepped right into the bear trap. I spent the rest of Saturday combing through the digital backups, schematics, signed mail receipts from the patent office, licensing terms, even my old emails with Ronson discussing Veridian. I made copies of everything, encrypted them twice, and stored them on 3 separate drives, one local, one on the cloud, and one mailed to myself in a sealed envelope, postmarked, unopened, just for the lawyers. By noon on Sunday, I'd assembled what I now referred to, without irony, as the Kyle Kit. Curated packet of doom containing everything from patent filings to system logs showing that the current implementation at Apex was using my proprietary command syntax. I even included a side-by-side comparison between my original module and the one Kyle's team had slapped their logo onto. It wasn't just similar. It was identical. The kind of identical that made judges raise eyebrows and call for early lunch. Funny thing is, I wasn't angry anymore. Not really. The grief had burned off in the first 48 hours like morning fog clearing over a kill zone. Now I just felt cold, clear like the air before a lightning strike. Kyle had taken my work, my job, and my dignity. Now I was going to take his company. By Wednesday, Apex's production floor sounded less like a humming hive of industry and more like a funeral with vending machines. The robots were still. The conveyor belt sat dormant like abandoned amusement park rides. Somewhere, a high-pitched alert had been beeping for 6 straight hours. No one could figure out how to shut it off, so they just started ignoring it, like corporate does with common sense. The Veridian Dynamics rollout had begun on Monday with Kyle in full Steve Jobs cosplay, black turtleneck, too tight jeans, and the dead-eyed smile of a man who's convinced that confidence can replace competence. He gathered the staff around the main production console and slapped a laminated chart onto the wall. By end of Q2, he announced, we'll have 30% more efficiency, 50% fewer labor hours, and a system that practically runs itself. 2 hours later, the first line jammed. Sensors began misreading product sizes, flagging standard steel brackets as critical defects. The auto-palletizing robot seized up and dropped a full shipment onto the floor. Nobody moved, nobody breathed. One guy muttered something about a poltergeist and got written up for negative energy. By the end of day 1, they'd lost $5,000 in damaged materials, another 7 in overtime trying to clean it up, and a full trailer shipment missed its delivery window. Kyle still smiled, though noticeably tighter now, like his teeth were on probation. On Tuesday, it got worse. The pick-and-place arms began twitching mid-cycle, as if the system had a nervous tick. Operators watched helplessly as 6 months of synergy began to unravel in real time. The new dashboard, Kyle's pride and joy, started flashing internal error codes that weren't in any of the documentation. One line manager said it was like trying to read IKEA instructions written by HAL 9000. That was the moment Kyle started turning on his own people. Why are these modules written in this pseudo script? He snapped at the lead integrator. That's not pseudo. That's custom logic, the poor guy stammered. We didn't write it. We were told to use the baseline as is. You mean the baseline I paid $2.4 million for? Yes, and it's kind of brilliant, honestly. It's adaptive, recursive, very lean, but we have no way to debug it. There's no version history, no documentation. Whoever built this, they didn't build it for collaboration. Kyle turned purple. His forehead vein looked like it wanted to unionize. He summoned a team of outside consultants by mid-afternoon, all wearing matching polos and expensive confusion. They gathered around the mainframe like surgeons prepping for transplant, only to end the day taking selfies in the parking lot while muttering phrases like proprietary disaster and beautiful chaos. Meanwhile, word started spreading on the floor. Whispered rumors that Susan, the old dinosaur, the legacy thinker, had been the only one who truly understood the systems. People remembered how things used to work, quietly, smoothly, reliably, when she was around. Now, you couldn't run a single line for longer than 10 minutes without a meltdown. One operator described it as trying to fly a plane where the cockpit keeps changing languages. Kyle, of course, refused to accept that the problem wasn't the infrastructure or the staff. He began pacing like a caged tech CEO, arcing into Bluetooth about data silos and root cause matrices. He doubled down, bringing in more consultants, more freelancers, more non-disclosure agreements. At one point, he ordered a code refresh, which resulted in the entire inventory tracking system going offline for 3 hours. By Thursday, Apex was hemorrhaging money and morale like a gut-shot deer. People stopped using the name Viridian altogether. They called it the virus. Back in my garage, I sipped my tea and refreshed the Apex internal portal using a mirror account I'd made for testing years ago. Still active, still accessible. Kyle hadn't even changed the admin passwords. Bless his MBA. Every time a line crashed, I knew exactly why. It wasn't sabotage. I didn't have to lift a finger. The system was doing what it was designed to do, protect itself from unauthorized use. The moment someone without the key touched the wrong node, Viridian responded the only way it knew how, by sealing the gates and locking the fools inside. Funny thing about elegant complexity, it looks like madness to a man who thinks a flowchart is the same thing as architecture. And Kyle, he was about to drown in it. By the following Monday, Apex Manufacturing was no longer manufacturing much of anything. What it was doing, quite effectively, was bleeding out on the concrete floor. It started with a misfire during the calibration of the precision welders on line 3, a minor software hiccup, supposedly. But instead of welding 3 anchor points on the chassis frames, the bots applied heat signatures in reverse order, effectively slicing each frame at its weakest point like metallic guillotines. 42 units, each costing $5,800 in parts alone, ruined in under 50 minutes. Sparks flew. The line shut down. Forklift nearly tipped over trying to remove the wreckage. Someone in the front office tried to blame it on operator error, until the diagnostic logs were reviewed. The system had told the robots to do it. Worse yet, the command string had no traceable origin. The software executed it with surgical precision, timestamped and verified, but when they tried to trace the code path, the logs looped back on themselves like a snake, swallowing its own tail. One consultant muttered, "I've never seen a system gaslight us before." The next day, the barcode scanners began misclassifying inbound parts. Steel rods were labeled as defective wood. Plastic sheeting was logged as high-voltage cable. An entire delivery from a trusted supplier got flagged as hazardous waste and was automatically routed to a third-party disposal service, which Kyle had to pay for twice. By Wednesday, people stopped bothering with explanations. At least 3 mid-level managers quit on the spot after being chewed out by Kyle in a meeting that ended with him throwing a dry erase marker across the room and screaming, "I am not losing to a piece of legacy garbage." The tension in the building felt like breathing in fiberglass. No one made eye contact. The bathroom smelled like stress and Axe body spray. Kyle stormed through the halls, red-faced, Bluetooth swinging wildly from his collar like a tiny, impotent pendulum. Every time something broke, he blamed the transition team. Every time someone quit, he blamed poor cultural fit. Every time someone asked if maybe, just maybe, they should reach out to Susan for help, he snarled, "We're not crawling back to that dinosaur. She built the mess we're escaping from, except I hadn't built the mess. I'd built the safety net." And Kyle had cut through it with hedge fund scissors, while Apex unraveled like cheap yarn. It was halfway through my first pottery class in 30 years, a community center workshop taught by a woman named Barbara who wore glitter Crocs and talked about chakra alignment like it paid the mortgage. She gave me a wheel in the corner and told me to let the clay feel my energy. I gave the clay structure, form, reinforcement curves. My bowl didn't have energy. It had load tolerance. I got updates from Linda twice a day. She'd text me during her breaks, each message like a tiny grenade. Linda, line 2 just tried to auto-load 2 SKUs into the same tray. Again, we lost $30K in rush inventory. Linda, Kyle screamed so hard he broke the clicker remote, his assistant cried. Linda, consultants walked off, said Codebase is deliberately hostile. Me, tell them it's not hostile, it's just lonely without me. Linda didn't know the full story, only that Viridian was mine. I hadn't told her about the protective subroutines I'd left buried inside. They weren't traps, not really, just safeguards. If someone tried to override system behavior without an authenticated keyholder, the software would react, shifting logic paths, deploying nonsense patches, quietly corrupting logs. All to buy time. All to protect itself from idiots with expensive haircuts and no vision. And Kyle, he was flailing, watching his empire glitch and stutter like a doomed video game speedrun. No cheat codes, no save file. Just the slow realization that he'd installed a system designed to run like a symphony without a conductor. The best part? He still thought he was in charge. They sent Martin. If Apex had a soul left, it was Martin Koenig, VP of Operations, former Navy logistics, proud owner of a coffee-stained spreadsheet he referred to as the Bible. It wasn't like Kyle. Martin didn't talk in acronyms or wear blazers with drawstrings. He talked like a man who knew how many bolts went into a hinge bracket and who'd once personally driven a delivery truck on Christmas Eve to meet a deadline. He was also, evidently, the last person in the building who understood the difference between arrogance and desperation. It was Friday again, exactly 1 week since my exile. The sun was just starting to slip behind my maple trees when the phone rang. Not my cell, the landline. The number only 3 people in my life used anymore, 2 of whom were my dentist and the neighbor who borrowed tools without returning them. I picked up, half expecting a robocall about car warranties. Miss Susan? Martin's voice cracked, then recovered. It's Martin, from Apex. Silence. A long, respectful pause, like he was approaching a live wire and waiting to see if it hissed. I know it's late, he continued, but we need help. I leaned against my kitchen counter, watching a squirrel wrestle with my bird feeder outside. It was losing, but it hadn't given up yet, kind of like Martin. The Viridian implementation, he began, is not going well, I offered. He exhaled, that defeated sort of breath where the pride goes out first, followed by the spine. It's a catastrophe. He admitted nothing syncs. The system's locking us out of our own archives. It's like we're working inside a Rubik's Cube that changes colors mid-turn. That's a poetic way to describe sabotage. He hesitated. I don't think it's sabotage. I think it's just beyond us. He was right. It wasn't sabotage. It was justice, slow-cooked and elegantly automated. So what do you need from me? I asked, though we both already knew. A consult. Just a few days. Help us bridge the old with the new. You know the legacy systems. You built half of them. And we suspect the newer platform, Viridian, was based on something you may have touched before. I smiled, invisible but sharp. Martin continued. Kyle doesn't know I'm calling. He'd never allow it officially. But I'm not going to watch this company burn just because he thinks engineers are replaceable. That almost moved me. Almost. Martin, I said slowly, you're one of the few people at Apex I actually respected, so I'm going to say this kindly. I walked to the window, the phone tucked between my shoulder and cheek, and watched the squirrel finally give up and scurry off. My consulting rates are astronomical. You'll need to liquidate some stock options just to afford the email I'd send. And even then, I might invoice you for punctuation. Silence. Then the faint, defeated shuffle of someone who just realized the safety net is made of knives. And besides, I added, I'm rather enjoying my old-fashioned retirement. Pottery, gardening, unbothered silence. I've rediscovered the radical joy of sleeping past 5 a.m. Another beat passed. Then Martin, ever the professional, gave me the only response a man like him could muster. Understood. Click. I hung up gently. It wasn't cruel. It was clean. Not a slammed door. Not a shouted, I told you so. Just the sweet, humming silence of no. The final collapse didn't come with fireworks. It came with a blinking cursor. A silent, blinking cursor on the main production terminal, line 1, the oldest and most stubborn part of the factory, where a night shift supervisor named Alex ran a routine diagnostic because the scanner wouldn't stop flagging 8 bolts as missing. It was supposed to be a harmless check. Standard protocol. Click a few buttons, generate a batch report, reboot. Instead, the moment he hit RUN, the screen froze, then flashed once. Unauthorized integrity check detected, then again, reverting to failsafe mode initiated. And just like that, the floor went dark. All terminals, all dashboards, every screen in the facility blinked off, then back on, blue with white text like a prophecy. Viridian Dynamics, system lockdown complete. Error code 1005A. License validation failed. System authority, null. In a matter of 90 seconds, the entire quarter's production schedule was gone. Not erased, corrupted. The inventory database was overwritten with recursive shell commands that made recovery not just difficult, but impossible. Every barcode, every batch number, every order reduced to static. Machines that had just been humming now sat cold and blinking, like they were embarrassed to be. The first email came in from Peterson Industrial, their biggest client. Subject, urgent missing shipment confirmation, then another from the legal team at Wilton & Bros. attaching a notice of breach of contract. By the time Kyle was pulled out of his weekly culture innovation brainstorm, playing ping pong with himself in the break room, there were over 40 flagged messages in his inbox. Half of them had the word termination in the subject line. Not the fun kind. He tried to reboot the system manually, big mistake. The root commands required biometric confirmation from a verified system architect. Kyle slapped his palm on the sensor like a toddler trying to open a vending machine. Nothing. His Bluetooth headset shorted out mid-call with one of the consultants, leaving him screaming into the void like a sitcom villain with no audience. He threw his tablet. It cracked. He screamed again. By noon, investors were calling. One of them, a tech fund from Palo Alto, wanted to know why they had funneled $3.2 million into a system that now appears to be held together by spite and vengeance. Another asked if Kyle had accidentally installed ransomware on purpose. The local business journal broke the story that afternoon. Apex Manufacturing in meltdown. New tech initiative triggers operational collapse. The article didn't mince words. Described Kyle as young and eager, but ultimately unprepared, with a quote from an anonymous employee describing the Veridian rollout as like giving a toddler a flamethrower and expecting a wedding cake. In a single business day, Kyle's kingdom became a cautionary tale. HR scheduled emergency exit interviews. Finance requested panic budget models. Legal drafted public statements that read like apologies dipped in PR sewage. And Kyle stood in the middle of the war room, surrounded by consultants, shattered whiteboards, and the smoldering remains of his reputation, and realized the truth. He hadn't installed my system. He'd stolen it, and now, without the architect, without the license, and without the one person who could have fixed it before breakfast, he had nothing. The letter arrived by courier. Not email, not fax. No digital trace. Just an embossed envelope, thick enough to carry consequence. Hand-delivered to Apex's reception desk by a man in mirrored sunglasses and a tailored gray suit who refused to sit down or speak more than 5 words. Please confirm delivery. Thank you. Inside, 8 pages of unflinching precision from Rosen, Kwong and Bell, a law firm known for turning IP theft into public crucifixions. Heading alone was enough to kill the mood in Kyle's executive suite. Cease and desist patent infringement. Veridian Dynamics Systems, the letter stated, in elegant legalese, that Apex Manufacturing was in violation of 7 distinct patents, each solely and indisputably owned by one Susan E. Rourke, former senior systems engineer, current private citizen, and legal thorn in Kyle's increasingly vulnerable side. They were to immediately cease all use, access, or attempts to repair the Veridian system, disconnect all associated modules, refrain from replicating or reverse engineering any portion of the codebase, and submit a sworn affidavit confirming compliance within 5 business days. And then came the offer. Susan, in a spirit of benevolence and generosity, phrased with enough sarcasm to blister the paper, would be willing to license the Veridian platform to Apex for a one-time fee of $31.5 million, roughly 10 times what Kyle had already burned trying to optimize his factory with stolen tech. But there was a second clause, non-negotiable. A public apology, printed in Manufacturing Today, Tech Ops Weekly, and Apex's own investor brief, personally addressed to Susan Rourke, acknowledging her role as the system's architect and denouncing the dismissive, ageist, and unprofessional actions that led to her departure. Failure to comply would result in an immediate injunction, a lawsuit for treble damages, and my personal favorite, federal escalation under Section 271 of the U.S. Patent Act. Kyle went quiet after that. His Bluetooth headset was found unplugged, dangling off the edge of his desk like a noose. Big screen in the war room, where he used to pitch vision statements and doodle growth curves with scented markers, now displayed only a frozen desktop wallpaper, a drone shot of a mountain peak he'd never climbed. The staff began trickling out like ants from a flooded hill. Consultants withdrew, orders vanished, and Kyle started taking meetings with business acquisition consultants, which is rich guy code for fire sale. That following Sunday, I sat in my garden, watching the bees court my lavender. Tea in one hand, tablet in the other. Headline, Apex to sell assets amid licensing scandal. Sources confirm major IP dispute. The article was merciless. It called Kyle an example of hubris in the age of automation, quoted a former engineer who said the Veridian suite ran smoother before they tried to modernize it, and noted that Apex's remaining assets were being quietly evaluated for liquidation. I scrolled slowly, not because I didn't know the ending, hell, I wrote it, but because some flavors of satisfaction deserved to be savored. My phone buzzed. Linda, he's selling the company for parts. You didn't just win, you salted the earth. I didn't reply, just sipped my tea and let the silence hang like a silk curtain. Veridian would survive, I would thrive, and Kyle would spend the rest of his life explaining to investors how he lost a multi-million-dollar company because he underestimated the woman he called old-fashioned. Checkmate. Big thanks for watching, you sneaky seniors. Subscribe to keep the coffee pot brewing revenge. Your ex-colleagues won't know what hit him.